This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond. Welcome to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond. And today, our very first show, we're looking at the future. And the future is here, 12 nautical miles off Aberdeen on 70 metres of water. The Kincardine floating offshore wind farm. In terms of being grid connected, it's the biggest in the world, and it is the future of energy, not just for Scotland, but the world over. But for now, let's go back to Tasmania in Glasgow, in the studio, safe and sound, on dry land.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex, and a very warm welcome to our studios here in Glasgow and the very first episode of Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond. Now, we've got lots to bring you in the show coming up this week and every week, and you will see that our beautiful studio walls are adorned with the works of art of the wonderful Gerard Burns. In fact, we're going to call these walls the Gerard Burns walls, but much more of that to come, because there's a very special section in our show which you'll see each week featuring Scotland's hidden heroes. You will also have an opportunity to write in with your thoughts about the show and ideas for the future in a special section called You Speak. But meanwhile, we're heading back to Kincardine, to Alex Salmond and the man known as the father of offshore wind, Alan McCaskill.
Alan McCaskill, Flotation Energy. I said this was the world's largest floating wind farm, but it's really a demonstrator at this stage. So Kincardine's demonstrating exactly what?
Demonstrating the floating technology. All the wind farms that we've built so far virtually are on fixed structures. This one floats on, as you can see, 3 buoyancy chambers. And
what's the big advantage of having a giant wind turbine that can actually move? What's the advantage in that?
Well, fundamentally, by floating, we can now access 2/3 of the world's space in the coastal areas, which is too deep for fixed structures.
So we're in 70 metres of water,
Yeah.
and we're only, 12 nautical miles off Aberdeen. So that's quite deep. So you're saying you couldn't actually build a fixed structure at 70 metres?
You might just be able to make a fixed structure going in 70 metres nowadays. Technology has improved. But we're now talking about taking these structures to much, much deeper depths. We're looking at 120 metres in our 120 metres in our two sites in the UK. The United States has just licensed a series of sites off California. They're in 1,000 metres.
And so therefore, there's an environmental advantage, isn't there? Because, people are much more comfortable with the idea that you've got a structure of that scale and size, but of course you can tow away.
Well, if you have to. Let's try to avoid that.
But one of these is going to Rotterdam, isn't it?
Yes, for repair. But we will not be doing that again if we can. We will learn how to do that here at site, and that's one of the things that we're working on at the moment.
But of course, one of the arguments against wind energy has been, well, what happens when the structures are old and rotten and overtaken? Well, people actually take them away, but of course, if it's a floating turbine, then there's no doubt about that.
It's easy enough to take them away, 35 years' time maybe, when these machines have reached the end of their life. But the infrastructure that exists on the seabed, things like the cables and all of that, has a much longer life, so we can replant the wind farm with newer and better machines and run it for another 35 years.
And how big are these things going to go? How big's that one?
That machine is 191 metres above sea level at the tip of the blade. The substructure weighs probably about 3,500 tonnes, and the machine itself weighs about 1,000 tons plus.
One of the guys was telling me that 1 ton of this machine can power a house for a year. Is that true, or was he just pulling my
Might
leg?
take a few turns, but fundamentally, yes, these machines are 9.5 megawatt machines, so they generate 9.5 times 24 megawatts. That's a lot more than you need for one house. I think typically a few 1,000 houses are what a wind farm like this can run, but I just don't know the answer to that.
But if we get enough, can we power Scotland? Can
Yes,
we power
can
Europe?
We're probably close to being able to power Scotland. It's the largest source of electricity and generation in Scotland now is wind, and the whole of Europe can be powered by it, along with solar and other forms of renewable energy, because they're complementary. You know, the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time, but if you've got both, you've got a balance. And then with batteries and other technologies, you can overall store the electricity and you can supply a renewable world.
And I suppose one of the other advantages of being deep offshore with floating turbines is that the wind blows more of the time.
And wind blows more of the time. The further offshore you go, the less people can see them, so we don't get upset because we're destroying the coastal views. And the resource is larger and there's more space.
Now you're a pioneer of offshore wind technology. You've been involved for 20 years, since the Beatrice project all these years ago. Yeah. But you were originally an oil and gas man.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did you have a kind of Damascus moment when you saw the light and said the future is wind?
I say I'm a reformed oil man. But reality was that I worked for an oil company and we had a power problem, and we came to a solution, which was that if we built some wind turbines, we'd have more power, and that was what we wanted. So that's why we pioneered, and at the time we built those Beatrice machines you're talking about, those were the biggest machines in the world. They were in the first to go on jacket structures, they were in the deepest waters, and they were the first ever to be built on the continental shelf. And that probably, in fact, honestly, was because we brought the knowledge and the skills and the ability that the oil and gas business has, which, although I worked in it and I don't any longer, I'm very proud of my time and career in the wind business, in the oil business, and now in the wind business.
And of course, one of the first tasks of these offshore turbines will be to actually power the oil and gas platforms. That's
Exactly.
one of the jobs they could do. And
that's what exactly we are doing. Our Greenvolt project is designed to power the Buzzard field and a series of fields in the outer Murray Firth, and our Senos project is designed to power the fields in the central North Sea, which means we can't prevent that takes out all of the hydrocarbons and the carbon dioxide that would normally be created if you were powering and driving those things using gas. So you sell the gas and use it more efficiently, and then you use green power to drive the oil fields.
Now, how about economic benefits? I mean, Flotation Energy is a Scottish company, but there's relatively little Scottish participation in this vast offshore resource, offshore Scotland.
Yeah, we were 5 people when we founded this company in the middle of 18. I think we're at the end of this month we'll be 100. Last year we were taken over by TEPCO, and so although we're a Scottish company and we work globally, our parent is Japan's biggest utility. Yes, it's sad that we can't be an independent Scottish company, but we weren't able to raise the capital in Scotland or the United Kingdom. And the capital to build these next generation wind farms, the price tag is a couple of billion at the start, up to, even as we get bigger and bigger wind farms, to significantly more.
But isn't there a pattern? I mean, if we go back several generations to the great oil and gas resource of Scotland, comparatively little local Scottish participation. With some exceptions to that, the Wood Group, for example, but comparatively little. Are we going to see the same thing yet again? We're going to have this industrial revolution offshore, but the offshore Scotland, we're going to have very little footprint in it.
Yes, except that it will be largely, as you go around the world, as I have been in many places, and you find Scots there working for companies driving the industry that we started to set up here in the 1970s. I joined the oil business in 78, so I've been involved in oil and gas and offshore wind now for nearly 40-something years.
And what would your advice be, let's say to the Scottish government, so as they could make a Scottish industrial footprint in this enormous resource?
Well, that is one. I thought that the process of Scotland was appalling.
Scotland was the auction that took
Yes.
place in 2022, in the early part of 22, where they seemed to auction off at bargain basement prices a large section of the Scottish Continental
I think they
Shelf.
got 700 million in late January, and the US auctioned off about a quarter of that capacity in February. They got 4.4 billion.
So as the most experienced offshore wind executive, certainly in Scotland, what do you think it was worth? If it wasn't worth 700 million, what was it worth?
I think you could have got that for a small fraction of the capacity, and
Or maybe every year.
and then you could have run auctions every 2 or 3 years and got that same amount of money every year for the next coming years. Many people in the industry complain about all these auctions, but I have to say, once you've opened Pandora's box and government has discovered that there's a lot of money in it, they're not going to stop doing it. So it is the way of the future, but that's life.
But of course, there's opportunities to come. There's a
Yeah.
lot more acreage offshore, and the deeper you go, the more acreage there is. There's licensing, there's the planning conditions, so there's opportunities to revisit that early mistake.
There is some opportunity, but let's see how and when. In the UK context, there was about 2 or 3 years between round 1 and round 2, and maybe a few more years between round 3, and then there was 10 or 12 years before round 4. So it could be a long time before any more acreage is auctioned off.
And I detect a wee bit of frustration here. I mean, with your expertise in the industry, I mean, you know, the sort of, I mean, Scottish Government consult you at all? Do they phone you up and say, listen, McCaskill, we're looking for some advice on this? I mean, the Crown Estate Commission, who, you know, spent most of their time previously running expensive buildings in London and forests and foreshores. I mean, did they phone you up and say, McCaskill,
Nope, we
what should
weren't
we do?
involved, but the interesting point is this, that not just us, but there's about 4 or 5 companies in the world who have knowledge and expertise in how to do floating. Not one of them won a site in Scotland. And I don't know what their criteria was based in, but it certainly wasn't based on the issues of knowledge and capability. When us, Equinor, RWE and others did not win sites, Ocean Winds, all of us have built these things, and only those who didn't build them were allowed to win sites. It's strange.
One final question, Al McCaskill. I mean, these are amazing structures. I know they're going to get bigger, and I know they're going to get deeper, but these are amazing structures. What do you feel when, you know, given your history and energy and your background, when you're out here looking at these things, I mean, it's like a lifetime's work and achievement. Do you feel a kind of warm glow?
Yeah, I'm an engineer, and I like to see the technology working, and I like to be part of making that happen. That's what turns me on. And I look forward to coming out to our Senos project, or our Greenvolt project. Greenvolt is supposedly in the water. I'm confident it will be in 27. And if that's in the water on 27, that will be with machines of somewhere between 235 and 260 meters diameter, probably the 235. And they'll weigh, you know, you're looking at systems weighing 2,000 tons, you know, it's going to be amazing.
And someday, you know, watching this program and delivering them, whatever, can you say to them, look, let's see this. This is going to deliver to you clean, green, and above all, affordable power.
Yes, but time, it will take time, because fixed has already got down to, it's the cheapest source of power. These machines, we need income streams that make it commercially attractive, but within 5 or 6 years, we will be competitive with anything else.
And you promise the price of the wind blowing won't go up?
And you pay once, because you don't pay for the fuel.
McCaskill, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And see you after the break when we continue our discussions on the most enormous potential of floating offshore energy.
I'm John Burko, and I'm going to impose order on those delinquent politicians at the Edinburgh Fringe in August. The question is that the delinquent politicians be held in check. As many as of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. See you in August.
Welcome back. Now, Alex is still offshore at Kincardine Field, not looking at hydrocarbons, but the bounty that is offshore wind. And we hear a lot nowadays about just transition, but what does that actually mean? We're going to speak to the workers who will be involved in the transition from oil and gas to the renewable sector. Over to Alex.
So Peter Gracie, skipper of the Windcat 16.
That's correct.
So here we are at the in the Kincardine floating offshore wind farm. I mean, often are you coming back and forward from Aberdeen to this place?
Well, this was I was here last year when they were first removing one of the towers for maintenance. I usually work in IJmuiden in Holland for the same company, the same offshore. They're only fixed instead of floating. But I'm fascinated by this, Alex. This is sort of relatively new to myself, and yeah, but it's.
So let's talk about your own background. I mean, you got a fishing background. I hear from the accent that you may be from Northern Ireland.
That's
perhaps,
correct.
Yeah?
Northeast coast of Northern Ireland. Small village, Ardglass, and that's where I first got into boats in my early teens, and I joined the prawn trawlers there. Spent numerous years at that, and as the job just got harder and harder to get crew, harder to keep going at that, I decided to change my career path.
So we think of, the just transition, this phrase that's getting bandied about, and we think of folk transferring from hydrocarbons to offshore wind or wind energy. But, there's quite a transition from the fishing industry into this business as well, is there not?
I thought it was the most easiest transition to do. They're also they're boats, it's seafaring. The safety in this which is getting better at the fishing now too. I found it a challenge at the start, but now it's like second nature. A fantastic change.
It'll be good having a crew, if you've got a crew ex-fishermen, they'll know what they're doing. It's quite useful to have that.
They're usually the best seafarers I've found. They're able to sort problems out. With the fishing, you're there on your own and you have to do it. I find the best seafarers for small offshore boats, inshore, offshore, are the fishermen.
Well, it's a small boat, but it's a powerful boat. I mean, we were coming off from Aberdeen at a fair rate of knots, were we not?
25 knots. We were getting. Wouldn't be one of the fastest of boats, but a great little boat. Usually 30 knots. My own boat in IJmuiden, I can get 30 knots.
So this is a diesel boat, but you're looking at something of a transition of this form of transport, aren't you?
Yeah, oh yes. Well, since I've joined Windcat workboats, they're 20 years now. It's 20 years they've been on the go. I'm here. This is my 6th year, and it basically changed my life. I'm seeing so much change in the company over that 6 years. Between now, we've got the first hydrogen-powered vessel in the industry, and it's progressing. Like I can see it. I can see in the future of this company it all being hydrogen.
So you might get to a situation where you're taking methanes, let's say, from the North Sea, you're splitting it into carbon dioxide and hydrogen, you're sending the carbon dioxide back into the oil fields to capture the carbon.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're burning the hydrogen, maybe in power stations, or maybe powering this boat, to access the wind energy, and you'll get a complete cycle of clean energy.
A full circle of sustainable, clean energy, green energy, and everything is going to evolve. These turbines, if I believe, do produce hydrogen. Would that be correct in saying so? So it's abundance of energy. when it's up and running, all
So-
round.
And to look back and your time in the fishing, your time in this, so you can look back and say, I was there when they were just starting out in these floating turbines. I was part of that frontier.
I'm absolutely excited about it all, and it's lovely to see. As it's been my second, I stood in before with this out in Kincardine this time last year, but I went out in the dark. It was a night shift, and you couldn't just get the full view. They're amazing technology.
So one last question, Peter. I mean, how did you, as a Northern Ireland man, end up in Scotland anyway?
I met the good wife over here as I was fishing into Troon, and went on from there. Haven't looked back, Alex.
And have you told her that the Scots originally came from Ireland?
No, but I'm going to when I get home tonight.
Peter Gracie,
She's a good steward.
thank you so much
Thank
for
you very
joining
much,
me on
Alex.
Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Thank you, Alex, and a much pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you.
Goodbye.
I'm John Burko, and I'm going to impose order on those delinquent politicians at the Edinburgh Fringe in August. The question is that the delinquent politicians be held in check. As many as other opinions say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. See you in August.
And now joining me offshore in the Kincardine offshore floating wind farm is Anne Joss, the Scottish organiser of the RMT. You're the successor, of course, Anne, to the legendary Jake Malloy. So what are the issues that RMT are looking at in this extraordinary new industry of offshore wind?
Well, thanks very much, Alec. And yes, you're right. I'm the successor to Jake Malloy, and what big boots these are to fill, to be honest with you. His knowledge and his expertise in all fields, offshore and just transition as well, are just so immense. It's definitely a new challenge.
Well, it takes a woman to do it then.
Well, I'm not going to go down that road with you, Alec. It takes a special person to be able to replace Jake, and I'm certainly going to give it my best endeavours as we move forward into, hopefully this just transition, which our position is, of course, as the RMT to support it.
What does this mean, this just transition? We hear a lot about it from government ministers, the various spokespeople. They say this just transition. I mean, what's the transition and how's it going to be just?
So the just transition overall is about transferring to more sustainable, environmentally friendly, energy and away from oil and gas. But part of that just transition must include a just transition for the workforce, because there are thousands of people working offshore. That is their livelihood. Looking to the future, we're hearing now, sound bites about oil and gas being obsolete by 2030 in the North Sea. But there needs to be a sector, a place of work in the renewables.
But there's quite a discrepancy even now between, still an enormous offshore and onshore oil and gas workforce and what is in relative terms, quite a small workforce in renewables at this stage.
At this stage there is, but we hope that going forward that will grow as these wind farms that we see out here continue to grow and expand, and that we hope that the workforce will grow and expand with them, both onshore and offshore. It's very important to us that those jobs become available and are protected and recognised through the collective bargaining procedures that we have within our unions who recommend these people.
Which is interesting because, notoriously, oil majors, international oil companies, weren't really all that comfortable with unions. One of the early battles that Jake Malloy had to fight. Are they becoming a bit more receptive to the idea of collective bargaining, or are you still got huge battles to fight?
There are always going to be battles to fight, Alec, but I think companies are realising the benefits of collective bargaining, and we've been able to demonstrate huge improvements in health and safety across all sectors where collective bargaining does exist, because there is a structure for people to be able to speak out without fear of retribution through their union, get their officers to respond on their behalf. And we've been able to make so many recommendations to various inquiries, both offshore, rail as well, that have been positive and have been viewed as positive, and I want to grow that.
In terms of health and safety concerns, I mean, in some ways the offshore wind industry is inherently more safe than the flammable materials of oil and gas, but there are still important safety issues in structures of this size in 70 metres of water here in the middle of the North Sea.
Absolutely, and there is risk everywhere, and we hope that we can work together collaboratively in identifying the risks, mitigating the risks, and looking at how we can continue to improve what the structure that's already there. That's the whole point of having collective bargaining agreements within all of our sectors, and that we've demonstrated well up till now that works. It's a product that works.
It must be an exciting time for you personally, Anne, you're coming into post as Scottish organiser of RMT at a time when this new industry is dawning. So, in a few years' time, maybe a generation's time, will an interviewer be sitting here in the North Sea asking someone else how they're going to replace the legendary Anne Joss?
Oh, hey, that's a question and a half, isn't it? I would like to think so. It's a hugely exciting time for me personally. You're right, as a regional organiser, I'm the first woman regional organiser in Scotland, so that's exciting for our people, for our union. It's exciting for our members as well, to have a woman that on that level that they can come and ask for assistance for, and I'm hoping that I'm not going to be the last for sure. It's exciting for me learning all of the stuff that's going on out here, and I just look at these lovely wind farms and I'm absolutely blown away by them, but I realise I have a lot to learn, and I'm eternally grateful for what Jake has done up till now to assist me in our just transition from one regional organiser to another. It's been great, absolutely great, and I'm really looking forward. I've been working with some of the offshore sectors, and I'm looking forward to taking on the challenges that they face, because it's still a very precarious industry.
Anne Joss, Scottish organiser of RMT, thank you so much for appearing on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Thank you, Alex, it's been a pleasure.
And now back to Tasmina in Glasgow, safe and sound in dry land.
Well, I'm glad to say that thanks to the wonders of modern technology, when we come back after the break, Mr. Salmond himself will be back in the studio with Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond. We'll see you then.
I'm John Burko, and I'm going to impose order on those delinquent politicians at the Edinburgh Fringe in August. The question is that the delinquent politicians be held in check. As many as I've had opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. See you in August.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, and to my favourite part of the show called You Speak, where you get the chance to have your say on what you've seen the week before. So please do in future episodes send in your tweets, messages and emails, and I'll be delighted to read them out. But even though this is our very first show, in advance of that you've been kind enough to send in your best wishes. So I'd like to take the opportunity to read out just a few of those. Suzanne says, "This is the kind of broadcasting we need more of." Petra says, "Alex Salmond was and still is one of my Scottish favourites. It's a pity that I never met him personally during my countless trips to Edinburgh and other places in Scotland. Well, Petra, who knows, hopefully the opportunity will arise soon enough." Dawn says, "We will be glued watching this. Well done, Alex. Great to see you back. My husband said, the man that talks sense." Thor says, "Looking forward to this. I think it has the potential to fill a sizable gap in Scottish political cultural commentary. Wish you all the best." And finally, Day says, "So that's what the 13th of July posts are all about. A people's history is so important." Thank you very much indeed, and I look forward to hearing from you next week. Now we move to Alex's favourite part of the show, where we delve into the past and look at some of those who have shaped the future of Scotland. And that section is called Hidden Heroes, in association with iScot magazine.
Now, Scotland has never been short of heroes. Women and men whose actions resound to this day through history, who fundamentally changed Scotland, sometimes changed the world. Mary Queen of Scots, Robert the Bruce, Mary Barber, Alexander Graham Bell, Alexander Fleming. We all know their names and what they did. But you know, I've always been fascinated by another category. I call them Scotland's hidden heroes. These are people who fundamentally changed things, often for the better, fundamentally changed civilization, the world, but nobody's ever heard of them. So we're going to pay tribute and homage to Scotland's hidden heroes. And the first of these is Bernard of Kilwinning. Bernard who? Bernard of Kilwinning. Who was he? Well, just listen to this. "As long as 100 of us remain alive, never will we on any conditions be subjected to the lordship of the English. It is in truth not for glory, nor riches, nor honours we are fighting, but for freedom alone, which no honest man gives up, but with life itself." The words of the Declaration of Arbroath, resounding through history. Most school children in Scotland will have heard a snatch of these. In a properly ordered country, every school child would know them. They were written, probably, by Bernard of Kilwinning. Now, what made that declaration important? Well, there were three things about it. Firstly, the words themselves. These are powerful words. My old tutor, Geoffrey Barrow, used to argue that they'd been copied largely from Sallust, the Roman historian, and maybe they were. All that indicates is that Bernard of Kilwinning was clever, educated, and knew his job. He was the Abbot of Arbroath. He was Chancellor of Scotland. He was a diplomat trusted by Bruce to negotiate foreign treaties. He was nobody's fool. Bruce didn't appoint fools. And his words resound through history. Secondly, it's important because the Declaration encapsulates the first ever European statement of contractual government. Because in the passage right before 100 of us remain alive, the Declaration waxes lyrical about what a great guy Robert the Bruce is. He's compared to Joshua from the Bible. He's done mighty things, but then goes on to say, but incidentally, if he ever sells us out to the English, we'll drive him out and we'll get somebody else as our king. And this was written not just in the name of the earls and the barons and the freeholders, the caste list of the feudal society, but as the declaration says, of the whole community of the realm, and introduces the idea that the people who govern you have to do certain things to represent the community of the realm, otherwise you'll get somebody else. Not in these days in an election, but nonetheless contractual government. And the third thing that's important is this encompassing of the idea of some sort of popular sovereignty has huge implications through history. April the 6th was the day of the sealing, not the signing, the sealing of the Declaration of Arbroath. It's also the day of Tartan Day in the United States of America, by Senate resolution, by order of President George W. Bush, probably one of the more sensible things he did as president, acknowledging the influence of the Arbroath Declaration on the American Declaration of Independence some 450 years later. It's a powerful impact on modern society and what we understand in ideas that the government is there not to govern for itself, but to govern for the whole community of the realm. Can we be absolutely certain that this was the work of Bernard of Kilwinning? Not absolutely, but there's a big chance, a very, very good chance. He was in pole position as Abbot of Arbroath and Chancellor of Scotland. He at least, I think we can say, drew together the text. And therefore he's a very worthy first member of the pantheon of Scotland's hidden heroes.
Join us after the break, where Alex will be interviewing today's Crossfire guests. We'll see you then.
I'm John Burko, and I'm going to impose order on those delinquent politicians at the Edinburgh Fringe in August. The question is that the delinquent politicians be held in check. As many as I've had opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. See you in August.
And now we come to a section of the show called Crossfire, where I interview two experts in the field under discussion, and we try to draw out some of the big underlying issues. And today, on the subject of Scotland's energy opportunity from deep offshore wind, I'm delighted to be joined by Craig Dalzell of the think tank Commonweal and Steve Chisholm, Director of Operations at the Global Energy Group. Gentlemen, welcome to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Hello, good to be here.
Hey, welcome, Alex. Thanks for having us.
Can I turn to you first, Craig? How can you describe the scale of this opportunity, what we're talking about here? I mean, how would you best encapsulate the scale of this opportunity in offshore wind?
I mean, the ScotWind project alone here that we're going to be talking about is one of the largest offshore energy projects in the world. It's going to produce actually many times more energy than Scotland needs, and it's going to require a great deal of thought about how we integrate the output from this into not just Scotland's energy mix, but the UK's energy mix as a whole. The entire national grid may have to be reconfigured to take on the amount of energy that this thing is projected to produce. The amount of investment that is coming towards this project is vast. I believe that ScotWind project has got some of the largest pot of foreign direct investment of any offshore engineering project, offshore wind engineering project in the world at the moment.
Steve Chisholm, from the Global Energy Group's perspective, one of the few big Scottish companies heavily involved in this business, how would you describe the scale of what we're talking about?
Oh, it's like what we've not seen before, Alex. I mean, in many respects, it really overshadows in multiples the opportunities we had for manufacturing in oil and gas. I mean, an oil and gas project, take BP40, one of the largest, one of the first of its day, made 5 large structures, put them out to sea and started producing oil. I mean, if you think of just one project, the one that's most recently completed, Seagreen off the Angus coast in Scotland, produces 1.1 gigawatts. That was 114 structures, each in excess of 2,000 tonnes. It's massive. A single blade going forward is more than the length of a football pitch. Turbines themselves, the dynamo, if you like, at the heart of it, designs now reaching up to in excess of 1,000 tonnes. So at a macro and a micro component level, this is massive. It's something we've not seen before. And equally, the opportunity, something we've not had the chance of before.
Craig Dalzell, would I be right in saying that when you're dealing with a vast resource of the level that you both have described, that the two ways a society can benefit are through economic rent, or revenues in layman's terms, to the government, which hopefully then will get to the people, and secondly, an industrial benefit. So you've had some pretty harsh things to say about the economic rent issue. You don't think that we're punching our weight in terms of getting the benefits for the people. Would I be right in saying that?
I've had harsh things to say about both sides of this, but the opportunities are certainly there as well. And the scale of this underlines why we have to get this right. The first time I looked at the ScotWind project was in January 2022 when the initial auction was announced, and we had severe concerns about the way that auction was run, the way that it was run. Instead of being an open auction where companies would bid in and effectively the highest bidder wins a plot on the scheme, there was a maximum cap on the amount that companies could bid. And while that auction did bring in something like £750 million to the Scottish purse, we did a follow-up study in January of this year that showed that if Scotland had run that auction in a way comparable to other international offshore wind auctions and had raised amounts comparable to those auctions, Scotland could have been looking at an auction fee, an economic rent in that initial period of anywhere between a few billion to up to about £16 billion. So we do believe that the way that initial auction was run was handled poorly and could have been done better for a much better impact on the Scottish economy.
Steve Chisholm, do you have a different emphasis from Craig on what we've heard? And how does all of this rush of investment impact on the industrial benefits that might flow to Scotland?
Look, I think from a kind of factual statistic point of view, you can't argue with Craig's view there. I mean, you compare just, the New York Bight, which was 6 areas of seabed, compared to, the 20 areas that were licensed in Scotland.
Can I ask what the New York Bike, I mean, that sounds like a hamburger joint in Fifth Avenue or something.
Yeah. So it's Bight spelled B-I-G-H-T, and it's just a plot of seabed off the east coast of the USA. Anyway, for 6 areas of development, that generated for the state 4.37 billion in dollar terms, which is an order of magnitude many times more than the 755 million that Craig referred to earlier. It's not quite as straightforward as that, because there's other dimensions to this as well. One of the things that ScotWind has taken on board is to make sure that there's a commitment for the developers to actually procure large amounts of the equipment, the services they need from Scotland. So whilst the 755 million figure might look poor in comparison to what's happening in other areas overseas, the commitments, that each developer had to say, this is the amount we're committing to spend in Scotland, the commitment to the rest of the UK, and commitment to, the rest of the world in terms of their capex spend. The Scottish commitment alone coming out of those 20 projects was 28.8 billion, nearly 30 billion pounds. And you could say, well, that's fine, but what if they don't? Well, there are going to be penalties imposed on the developers that don't follow through on their supply chain plans. And of course, time will tell to what extent those severities have teeth and how they're applied. But, immediately, just May last year, at least 24 of those developers signed up to a collaboration agreement, Scotland's collaboration framework, committing to work together. And of course, a number of those have committed funds specifically within their bids to develop the supply chain, in excess of 300 million in aggregate for that. But, SOIC, which is Scottish Offshore Wind Energy Council, sort of partnership between industry and government, had a call for applications for infrastructure development, which closed just weeks ago. It had 44 applications, and they tallied probably something in excess as a minimum £4 billion of projects that people want to get off the ground to create infrastructure and projects. Now, opportunity is great, delivery is different, and the big question mark is, will and how will we deliver?
And Craig Dale, doesn't Steve Chisholm have a fair point there? There are penalty clauses if these big developers don't go ahead with what they've promised.
Yes, but the problem is the penalty clauses are comparatively tiny with respect to the scale of the investments here. We're talking about multi-billion-pound investments, but the cost of failing to deliver is on the order of a few £100,000. So while I'm sure there are companies out there who are going to invest and are going to do well, there almost is an incentive for those investments to go overseas if that is cheaper than investing in Scotland, if it's cheaper just to ship the jobs overseas and pay the fine.
Now, can I ask you about that, Steve? Because, Global Energy Group's a great success. And as we can see from that magnificent scene behind you, you're a company which is involved in the deep offshore sector, but you're one of comparatively few Scottish companies with a big footprint in this industry. So how can we manage things so that more Scottish companies will be doing what the Global Energy Group's doing?
Well, I think the reality is we've done an awful lot, but, we're frustrated as well that thus far we haven't been able to do more. We have had aspirations for many years to have a major manufacturing facility at the site, and it's a project we're still progressing. Recent Green Freeport announcement for the area has unlocked a new opportunity for us to develop that. But I think, there's an awful lot of talking going on at the moment. And if you think that Scotland kind of missed the manufacturing opportunity with onshore wind, and then we missed it with fixed offshore wind, floating wind, which Scotland excels at in terms of its natural resource, it's the last chance saloon. And the danger with frameworks and summits and, collaborative agreements is we can spend too long trying to get the perfect solution, too long talking about terms and conditions. What we need is really government, developers, people like ourselves to work together. It's got to be this new era of I brand it the new era of co-opetition. 2 years ago, we wouldn't speak to the port down the road, never think of collaborating with them. The same with the key fabricators that are around, different parts of Scotland and the UK. we're talking to them almost every week now about how can we bring our forces, our capabilities, our assets together to actually, provide solutions which can be competitive and which can be at scale. So I think in many respects, we've got to recognise the timer's coming down, and what we need are groups of people to make bold decisions and just start doing stuff.
The last chance saloon, I mean, that's a phrase that's leapt out from what Steve had to say, Craig. Would you agree with that?
Completely agreed, and the big difference between offshore wind and the previous oil boom is that oil runs out, wind will be with us forever. So if we get this wrong, the consequences will be with us for a much longer time period, and that's why we're wanting to get much more government investment in this as well. We want to see a public-owned energy company. We want to see direct investment from government, direct equity stakes in offshore projects, and other ways that we can do to help capture that economic benefit and keep it in Scotland rather than seeing it go off to multinational fossil fuel companies or to foreign public-owned energy companies who are also heavily investing in this.
Now, gentlemen, it's a splendid discussion. You've elucidated the scale of the resource, the different things that need to be done. I want you both in a minute or so to encapsulate what would be your policy proposals so that Scotland maximises the benefits, gets out of that last chance saloon and gets us into the departure lounge for a new industry and prosperity. First, Steve Chisholm, what would be your perspectives to get the maximum benefits for the Scottish people?
Well, I think it's not just to look at the Scottish level. Some of the challenges we have to be solved at a UK level. So contracts for difference, the contracts that award electricity contracts to the developers, historically focused in price, and Tim Pick did an excellent job, appointed as an offshore wind champion to identify and help propose solutions that could break down the barriers to development, both for industry and for the economic benefit of secure electricity supply. And of course, we need to see contracts which don't just focus on price, they have non-cost criteria. In other words, let's reward and incentivise developers to buy from local UK Scottish factories. Let's incentive the ones that bring new innovation and technology forward and the ones that are willing to work together. And the message to governments, I think, would be stop talking about a partnership where your role in the partnership is to sit above it and put an ask down. Drop down a level, get your wallets out in the same way the industry needs to get theirs out, come together and have a real shared partnership investment. I mean, Esbjerg, it's a port in Denmark that's hailed around the world as a world-class flagship example of how to develop a port. Literally, just yesterday in the paper, announcing a deal with Pension Denmark to unlock another 780 million to go straight into manufacturing facilities to keep them at the forefront. That's the bold action we need. So that's the message. Let's stop talking about big things. It only takes a couple of developers to manufacture one government initiative to do the first project that brings all this together and starts things getting built. We need to see more factories in Scotland and the UK. We need to be bold and just start doing stuff. Otherwise, the clock's going to run out and we'll watch others doing what we could have done.
Well, talking of the clock running out, Craig, in a nutshell, what would your perspectives be?
More or less the same, except with much more direct involvement from public ownership in Scotland to help maximise that investment in Scotland. As I say, it's not just about price; it's where that price goes in the end. And the next time we run an auction the scale of Scotland, let's try and maximise the upfront benefit so that we could start doing things that also impact the energy market on the demand side, like insulating houses and improving energy efficiency and helping people in their homes during what is going to be an ongoing energy crisis.
Craig Dale, Steve Chisholm, a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for appearing on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, that discussion was particularly valuable because for a subject of such enormous potential, with such enormous implications for Scotland, there's been relatively little serious analysis of the opportunity in the future of deep offshore wind in Scotland. A learned article here, an offshore wind conference there, but little in the way of serious analysis. And that must change. Because there's two ways a society can benefit from having enormous natural resources. The first is economic rent, and ours revenues that flow through the government and hopefully onto the people. And the second is the industrial impact, what it does to transform industry within a country. Now, the danger is this. I mean, Scotland currently dominates the prospective investment in deep offshore wind. I mean, that sounds great. We're world leading. But the danger is also apparent. Because 50 years ago, we've been here before, oil and gas was developed at breakneck speed in Scotland. And one of the features was that Scotland didn't get the revenues, and it was a long time before we met and received the economic and industrial benefit. And of course, the revenues were developed, and the whole enterprise was developed at that pace, because the implication was the Treasury, the London Treasury, had to get the revenues in to save the UK economy. It would be a tragedy if we were to beat and repeat the same mistakes with offshore wind. If that breakneck speed of development was to result in reduced revenues and reduced industrial impact. You know, there's an old saying that we should remember in these matters. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And now back to Tasmina, who's going to tell us a bit about the next episode of Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. And with that, sadly, it brings us to the end of the very first episode of Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond. And we both hope you've enjoyed watching the show as much as we've enjoyed making it and bringing it to you. Now, if you're looking for extra content, don't forget to subscribe on Twitter or Apple Podcasts, or indeed on Spotify. And also remember to write into us with your comments and ideas on the show at alexsalmond.scot via email, via Twitter, Facebook and the usual channels. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, coming up next week, a very special episode for a very special woman. A tribute to the late, great Dr. Winifred Ewing. Please do join us as we speak on her life and wonderful times and her contribution to Scotland. We'll see you then.
This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.